Hey there, fellow adventurers. This is Mike, and you're watching At Home in Wild Spaces. If you've been following us for a while, you know that we've shared bear videos before. We definitely invite you, if you haven't already, to go check those out. But today we have something pretty unique, probably the most intimate look into the lives of these animals that we've captured yet. A short time ago, while visiting Yellowstone National Park, we happened upon these two. As luck would have it, we had actually encountered one of these bears a couple of years before. So the female bear seen in the foreground was actually on a hillside above me while I had to change a tire in 2019. So we have a little bit of a history. And if you guys ever want to hear that story, let me know. Maybe I'll make a video on it someday. Though we're somewhat familiar with one of these bears, we always maintain an appropriate distance. All the footage you ever see from us at Home in Wild Spaces is captured responsibly at a distance of 100 yards or more, or from within our car. Such was the case with the images that you see here. After initially spotting them just along the roadside, they settled in a clearing a mere 40 feet from my car. Adult bears are normally loners, but it was mating season, and that's pretty clearly what brought these two together. Having reviewed Yellowstone's bear reports in 2019, there were only 3 recorded instances of park visitors being able to observe mating behavior from the side of the road. So this isn't really something that most people can expect to witness. It was a pretty remarkable sighting, and I thought that was going to be the end of it. But as fate would have it, I caught up with these two again a day later. I was rather fortunate, along with a coyote, bald eagle, and several ravens, to locate an elk carcass the following day. Initially, I didn't see any bears. However, after checking a couple of times, I was fortunate to again catch up to these two. So I spent a lot of time comparing the footage that I showed you earlier in the video with this footage that you're looking at now, and I'm pretty much certain that these are the exact same bears that I ran into the previous day. But I'm curious what you guys think. Do you think these are the same bears that I showed you earlier, or a new set of bears? Let me know in the comments. This was a whole lot of fun to watch, kind of like 2 teddy bears going at it. This is classic mating behavior, kind of this playful wrestling and kind of nibbling and pawing at the face. This was a really interesting exchange. It seemed like the male was having a hard time interpreting the female's signals. But if that is the case, they got over it pretty quick. Just a quick safety tip for any of you who find yourself in the backcountry. If you ever do stumble across 2 bears that are mating, you'd be wise to give them plenty of space. They don't appreciate being interrupted. Mating season for grizzly bears typically occurs between May and July, but it can linger on into August as well. While the bears will mate during the summer, the female's eggs actually won't be implanted until the beginning of hibernation, which is how she actually times giving birth to her cubs in the spring. Clearly not a conscious decision on her part, but a fascinating little bit of bear biology. One of the exciting things about bear sightings is that you never quite know what's going to happen next. There were several times where the female got up and wandered off, and we thought perhaps they were going to part ways, but that didn't end up being the case, and in fact the show had just begun. The other thing that's kind of interesting is if this female does get pregnant and does have cubs in the spring, this male may or may not even be the father of those cubs. The reason for that is that bears are actually pretty promiscuous, so the female here is likely to have similar dalliance with more than one male during the breeding season. So a carcass like this tends to draw attention, and I'm certain that you've already seen the coyote, the eagle, and you can see a raven here that were also drawn in. For the most part, the bears kind of had the run of the place, but as time went on, that coyote got a little bit more daring, and you have to wonder if he knew something that we onlookers did not know. So generally speaking, I'm a big fan of just kind of giving you the natural experience. So I'm going to go ahead and just be quiet for a minute, let you just watch the bears handle this elk, which by itself probably is between 400 and 500 pounds, to give you just an idea of how powerful these animals are. And then when that coyote comes in and starts mixing things up a bit, I'll probably jump in and make a couple of other comments. So you'll see here the bears stopping and taking notice of the coyote. This is where things get a little bit more explosive and also entertaining. So time and time again, these bears would get up and chase the coyote, but then they'd have these moments where they'd lock eyes and like in slow motion just kind of like drift off. Now and again, they'd regain their focus and chase after the coyote, but other times they would just collapse into the grass and roll around with each other until the coyote managed to grab their attention again. So I found this fascinating. It seemed to me like the two bears were working together to try and surround the coyote, which is not something that I'd ever seen before. But clearly the coyote was able to maintain a safe distance. From my vantage point, it seemed like the bears were genuinely enjoying themselves in this little game of cat and mouse with the coyote. So this exchange where the female grabs the male by his face and drags him off to the side is kind of one of the funnier moments to me. No trouble interpreting that signal. Just a quick note, I do apologize for the shaky footage. At 400 yards or so, it was pretty difficult to get some really steady shots. But I've done what I can in post-production to try and smooth it out so it's not as distracting. After a while, it became pretty apparent that the bears didn't really have the energy or the interest to consistently pursue the coyote. This is likely because, one, they'd been feeding on the elk for a number of days at this point, and two, they've been very busy mating with one another. So you have these two bears that are both full and probably tired, and part of me wonders if the coyote knew that and realized if he just kept his distance that there would be meat aplenty for him as well. So in watching this footage, I think it's really easy to get a false impression of these animals. So there's a lot of footage of them rolling around and being playful and wrestling and, being what some people would call cute. However, there have been a number of incidents this year. There's tragically been 3 fatal bear attacks out here in the West, 2 of which were caused, that I'm aware of, by grizzly bears. And I have been thinking about addressing those in an upcoming video because learning to share space with these animals is literally a matter of life and death. So I'm probably going to take a little break in producing our redwood video so that we can kind of talk about what's going on with grizzly bears, if there's an increase in attacks, and if so, what's causing that. And then we will, of course, get back to the redwoods and other content as soon as possible. And finally, I just want to take a moment and thank you for joining me today and invite you, if you're enjoying the video, to make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The internet is kind of this endless sea of videos, and if you don't turn on notifications, you could well be missing some of the best outdoor videos available online. So with that, I'll let you guys finish up watching this. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.